Chief Mohan Bhagwat recently said that raking up such issues on a daily basis was, quote, unacceptable, unquote. Bhagwat feels that such surveys create bad blood and deepen societal divides. And viewers, he's made a number of statements. One particularly sticks in our minds. He says, we have been living in harmony for a long time. If we want to provide this harmony to the world, we need to create a model of it. After the construction of Ram Mandir, some people think they can become leaders of Hindus. They're raking up similar issues in new places, he says. This is not acceptable. It's on your screens, viewers, the gist of that statement. Every day, a new matter, a dispute is being raked up. How can this be allowed? This cannot continue. India needs to show that we can live together. Viewers, days after he made that comment, towards the end of the year, the latest issue of the RSS-affiliated magazine, The Organizer, has however argued in an editorial that knowing the real history of disputed sites and structures was important for, quote, civilizational justice. This is being seen as a tacit support for efforts to liberate Hindu places of worship. Viewers, if you read excerpts of that magazine, you will find that there is quite an affirmation for that project. Now, despite the denials that have come from the organizer saying, no, we are not trying to contradict Mr. Bhagwat, clearly there is a difference in perception, if nothing else. For now, the courts have imposed a halt on surveys and any legal move to reclaim Hindu places of worship. In the ensuing weeks, that matter is going to be reheard in the courts. How should Hindus react, viewers? Should they surrender their claim to their civilizational history? Should they stop looking? And fundamentally, if this is a quest for reconciliation, can it happen without the truth? These are fundamental questions that we need to ask ourselves and we need to resolve. And to discuss this further, I'm joined by Dr. Ranganathan and also Mr. Rashid Kidwai, journalist, who's a political commentator, has seen many iterations of this kind of conversation in the last decades, 2 or 3 decades, viewers. So Dr. Ranganathan, as an analyst, as somebody who looks at politics and has a particular view on this subject, what should Hindus do? You have the courts that are telling us to back off, in a manner of speaking. I know the matter has to be resolved, etc., but that's the sense we're getting. We're being told by the RSS, which presents itself really as a body that speaks for the larger Hindu interests, saying, I think we should stop this. This is the road to disaster, societal divisiveness, a fractious polity. What should we do?
Good evening, Rahul. Good evening, Michael. And wishing everyone a very happy and prosperous year. Look, I've said this before, I repeat, I don't disagree with Dr.
According to me, every demolished temple has to be resurrected, every shivling has to be unearthed, and every idol reclaimed. There are idols that were broken by Aurangzeb and buried under the steps of mosques so that devotees could walk inside and trod upon these idols. Each one of those idols have to be reclaimed and put where they belong, which is Mathura, Janamsthan. Because I assert this is not a Hindu issue or a Muslim issue. The problem comes when Dr. Mohan Bhagwat and others are thinking that these are religious issues. This is not a religious issue at all. Looking for shivlings, reclaiming demolished, destroyed places of worship, correcting historical injustices is an Indian issue. It's a civilizational issue. People around the world, especially the leftists, take great pride in correcting historical injustices. But then they don't cry hoarse and say, well, this should not be done, that should not be done. The statue of King Leopold should not be broken. Churchill's statue should not be defaced. Cecil Rhodes' statue should not be taken out. The Confederacy General statue, Pizarro, should not be desecrated. But right in India, they say we must not reclaim historical places of significance or fight for correcting historical injustices. To say reclaiming Ram Janam Bhoomi is enough for Hindu personally is a facetious argument. Because, Rahul, one hallmark of justice is that it has to be applied universally. Because when one goes by logic, morality, first principles, objectivity, as science and law teach one to do, numbers do not matter. 40,000, 4 million, each and every cry for justice has to be heard. But when one goes by fear, emotion, coercion, subjectivity, numbers matter. We have to decide where we stand. Will we, for example, say, oh look, let us demand reopening of just 3 cases of atrocities against Kashmiri Hindus, only the most prominent ones, Neelkant Ganju, Girja Tiku, Lassa Call. No need to hurt Muslim sentiments by reopening 29,997 other cases. Will we say that? To many, Krishna Janamsthan would be a more sacred place than Ram Janamsthan. To others, Kashi Vishwanath is the most sacred of all. And yet others, Kul Devi's temples, their Kul Devta temples will be above everything. Who is Dr. Bhagwat or anyone to decide or rank the importance of gods and their abodes? As I say, every demolished temple has to be resurrected. I said this is a civilizational issue because we have to find out what actually is civilization. For me, Rahul, the mark of civilization is this unquenchable thirst of man to demand justice for his ancestors, to correct a historical wrong. Because that exemplifies a continuity, an idea, a memory that can never be erased, that is worth fighting for and preserving. It makes justice greater than the sum of its parts. And that is why a civilization is not fleeting like an empire. To demand justice for a people who are dead for hundreds of years, it is almost as though you can feel their pain, their suffering, their destruction that has transcended the limits of body and time. And that is why history is a medicine, why catharsis is a cure. And today, when I see Hindus wishing to reclaim Kashi Vishwanath or Mathura, I see this as catharsis, as a deliverance of justice to my ancestors who were terribly wronged. I do not know how long it would take, what shape the reclaimed temples would take. I do not know when they would ultimately come up. In a way, being an atheist, these issues are not of importance to me. But I know for a fact that today, seeing Hindus fight for their rights, the deliverance has come. And it is confounding, just a minute, to me, because I am but a bunch of cells here today, gone tomorrow. But till the time, Rahul, I am alive, this concept of striving to correct historical injustice is vital. It defines who I am, what civilization I am part of. That erasing my genes cannot erase my civilization. The concept of justice is like memory. It keeps getting passed on until realized, and we have to realize it. The historian Sri Sitaram Goel meticulously tabulated 1862 mosques that are built upon demolished temples. According to many, this number may be as high as 40,000, and that is why we need to look at each and every shivling, wherever it is, hidden or exposed, underground or over it. We owe it to our ancestors, Rahul. We owe it to justice itself.
Okay, look, very expansive there, interesting points. I will ask you a question in just a few minutes, but Rashid Kidwai, this is an impassioned plea for justice. Look at it from that perspective. Let me read out V.S. Naipaul. V.S. Naipaul said, and I quote, "The Marxist attitude to history, which is in substance says there is a higher truth behind the invasions." You know, the invasions that I'm talking about that began in 1000 AD. Feudalism and all that. The correct truth is the way the invaders looked at their actions. They were conquering, they were subjugating, and they were in a country where people never understood this. Only now are the people beginning to understand that there had been a great vandalizing of India, unquote. Now that the people have realized this, how do you expect them to look the other way, ignore it?
Well, Rahul, first of all, I am not very sure whether I am a right person to be debating or participating in this discussion, because these are all very, I would say, as you rightly described as civilizational questions. I admire my fellow panelist, Mr. Ranganathan's zeal for it, and he's of course within his rights to articulate this point of view, move court, and and of course, create a kind of, in a democratic way, a kind of campaign so that the stated objectives can be achieved. From my understanding, there is a rule of law, there is a constitutional democracy, and where if there is any issue that needs to be addressed, it cannot be a community specific. Then of course the question comes in, as I said, as somebody who's not really in it, is that how far are we going back? Are we going to look at things that happened before 1947 till 1857, or between 1857 to 1526, or whatever period we can go on, or 1,000 year, 5,000 year? In a way, we really go back as per science. Dr. Ranganathan can correct me. The first human being, dates back to some 4 lakh. Years ago, in somewhere in Ethiopia, or some place, Kenya. If that person indeed was there and moved on, then how are we going to settle all these things?
Right.
So these are all problematic. But in a democracy, everybody has a right to
No, I understand
sort of,
that, and
say,
look,
propagate.
that's a very reasonable point that you're making, Mr. Kidwai. Yes, so far the movement has been democratic. What if the system shuts the door? The court, for example, rules the other way. What happens then? Dr. Ranganathan, there is that danger. We saw one monument come down because of zealotry at one level. But I want to ask you a question, because, this is what I understand, the question about liberal hypocrisy. Yes, there is liberal hypocrisy. They argue for the pulling down of Leopold's statue and the colonialists in the West, etc., etc. But there's a slight difference, people would say. They say that the majority community there is looking at recompensating those that they indentured. Here it's a bit different. Here the majority community walks around as if it has been wounded by the actions of the minority, which actually are in a lesser number, and therefore will obviously become outvoted on any issue such as this, and they will think that this is now a sense of reprisals. Not somebody taking history and bringing themselves to confront it. They won't see this as a civilizational project. They'll say they were being punished for the actions of people that we just shared a faith with. We didn't share their biases or prejudice.
Rahul, can I answer?
Yes, that's meant for you. Yeah.
Yeah, look, thank you. Look, no, I think, when we start to put labels on the people seeking justice, I think that is when the problems arise. As I said, this is not a Hindu-Muslim issue at all, or a majority-minority issue.
No, I was seeking a very particular answer. Look, in the West, for example, it's the majority, it's the whites. Let's just put the label out there. It's the whites who say, okay, we indentured you, we enslaved you, we're sorry. And maybe these things, these statues, these symbols of that confederacy that did this to you, are obviously things that we don't want anymore to proudly display, because it rankles and it is a reminder of that horrible brutality. So let's remove them. I can understand that. But here, as I said, the majority is sort of thinking that, look, it is wounded and it needs to reclaim something, that the vicissitudes of history is sort of now, too much time has flown. That's what they say.
I mean, as I said, I'm sorry. You see, the issue, Rahul, out here is very simple. It is, as I say, I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself out here, but I get your point that in the West, it is the white majority that perpetrated that barbarism. In India, the barbarism was perpetrated on the majority by, people who were more powerful at that point of time than what the majority is right now. But that does not in any way lessen the crime or remove the barbarism. If barbarism has to be removed, the question is, whom do you approach? Now, as I said, perhaps more sacred than Ram Lalla is the Krishna Janamsthan. Perhaps more sacred than the Murti of Ram Lalla is the broken idol of Krishna Lalla, or baby Krishna, that was deliberately spread and buried under the steps of Jahanara Mosque in Agra, so that people could trod on it. Now, do we accept it? That, look, in the name of Bhaichara or Ganga Jamna Tehzeeb, let us be fine with this kind of rank humiliation that people have to face through, that their most beloved Lord's idol, broken idols, are stepped upon every passing day. If we as a country are fine by it, who am I to say? But it appears to me that our judges are fine by it, because they don't want Hindus to at least approach them, even the judges, to seek justice. I don't care which side the justice tilts. If, for example, the Ram Janambhoomi verdict would have come not in agreement with the Hindus, we would have accepted it. But to say that you cannot even approach, courts to seek justice, I'm afraid it cannot happen in a democracy.
Okay. Well, viewers, you've heard 2 points of view. This is, as I said, one of those issues that exemplifies, perhaps, the central fault line, as I have been starting out to say on this show. I don't know what the route for reconciliation is, but certainly burying the truth cannot be. Maybe we need to find another way of excavating the truth. I don't know. Maybe it's not looking under temples. Maybe we should accept that, look, the fact of the matter is that these things happened. There should be a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that should be set up. It was done in South Africa to great aplomb, viewers. And you see the benefits of that. Perhaps we need to look at some mechanism. I don't know what the answer is. But certainly, as Dr. Ranganathan says, it cannot be to go back to as things stand. That would not be in any way doing justice to history itself, which is a determinant really of the future. I leave it at this, viewers. India is mending fences with China, as you know, and at the same time is faced with re-establishing its ties with new regime in the United States. President-elect Trump is known to be a friend of India, but he's also a China hawk. India needs to have good relations with both the United States and China and has to walk a diplomatic tightrope. Can it pull it off? Or will the NDA face some difficult choices? Will we have to make choices between who we partner with, ally with, strategically, and in other ways, in the year ahead, in 2025 and beyond? To discuss this, we're joined by Kamal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary, and also Professor Brahma Chileni, Strategic Affairs expert. Mr. Sibal, we're at an interesting inflection point suddenly in 2025 as we go in. We have opened a line now to Beijing. There seems to be momentum, albeit a cautious one, that is sort of beginning to take root there. On the US side of the fence, new man in office, Trump, known to have a good rapport with Mr. Modi. Are we going to find ourselves squeezed between these two, or there is room to maneuver and keep everyone happy and walk this diplomatic tightrope, and what will it take?
I think we'll be able to manage both relationships, because our stakes in the two relationships are of a very different order. In the case of United States, the stake is to keep expanding our ties and in particular have access to technology and investments, and also manage the fallout of the unpredictable nature of Trump's personality and his policies. Though I must say that while the United States or Trump's relationship with both China and Russia has very, very important strategic dimensions, and both countries at different levels are challenging American power. India does not have the same nature of strategic problems with the United States. There are difficulties, but they are not of a deep strategic nature, and therefore they are manageable. Now, in the case of China, we've had some breakthrough only in terms of resolving some of the issues that arose from China's invasion, China's incursions into Ladakh, into the Galwan area, and the prevention of patrolling by China of Indian Army, which was a pattern which had been established ever since we had the 1993, 1996, 2005 and 2013 border management agreements.
Yeah.
Now, whereas in the case of some of the other hot points, we were able to create some kind of a buffer zone between the two countries and prevent the possibility of immediate clashes. The sticking point was Depsang and Demchok. On this, yes, the Indians and Chinese have managed to reach an agreement where patrolling will be resumed. But this is far from the core of the problem. The core of the problem is de-escalation and then adherence to the established agreements. And beyond that, of course, to resolve the border issue in ways that is acceptable to both sides. And I think we are nowhere near that. And if the latest information that has come, that China is now divulged its plans to build this huge dam at the bend of the Brahmaputra, and this has come after the so-called minor breakthrough with China, then you can see what Chinese intentions are and down which road they want to go. They're not going to make any concession to India. Their target or their goal is to manage the ties with India in such a way that they do not create a two-front situation for themselves, because they have to deal with the United States and Trump on the Taiwan question and on other issues on the trade side, which if Trump decides to do what he has announced, will mean a major setback in the ties between the United States and China, and will have fallout in so many other areas. So China wants to relatively stabilize the border situation with India without going into the core issues. This business of our special representatives meeting is a replay of what was agreed in 2003 when I was foreign secretary, and you had 18 or 20 or God knows how many meetings of the SR of the special representatives, and all that at the level of the special representatives could be done in terms of clarifying the basis on which the border issue can be resolved has already been done. Beyond that, it is a political decision, and I can't see China with the kind of statements they make on sovereignty and their total refusal to concede anything when it comes to their version of their sovereignty. I can't see them at the SR level reaching some kind of a breakthrough with us. It's a holding pattern. It suits us. It suits us. It suits us very much because we don't want actually to be dragged unnecessarily into an American policy vis-a-vis China, which goes beyond our interests in deterring China from expansionism in the Himalayas and from entering into the Indian Ocean in ways which is not going to happen tomorrow, but in ways which can create problems for us in this space. But we don't want to get involved in any adventurism on Taiwan or anything else, or get involved in the Western Pacific region militarily in any way. And therefore, it is good for us that we keep this option open vis-a-vis China, so that we have more elbow room vis-a-vis the United States.
Let me bring in Professor Chileni. That was an expansive attempt at giving us a complete 360. But let's get into a few minutiae. Professor Chileni, I want to ask you specifically this. How much of an unpredictable factor is Trump? Are we going to have this fabled sort of courtship that we saw in the first Trump presidency, where the Prime Minister and Trump clearly bonded? Is that going to happen this time, given the issues that have come up in the elections in America over the last 3 or 4 years? We are already facing a lot of criticism from the MAGA sort of groupies about Indians and how they're taking over the jobs and this, that, the other. These are all sensitive issues.
Rahul, was Biden predictable for India? How do we explain the regime change in Bangladesh that was blessed by the Biden administration? That has been a fundamental development that will have major implications for India's security in the years to come. We keep talking about Trump being transactional. Wasn't Biden transactional in his foreign policy? In fact, US foreign policy under successive presidents has been transactional by and large. So I don't think we should focus so much on personalities. Presidents come and go, like in India, prime ministers come and go. But in the US, the basic interests and the basic missions don't change. And I think we need to focus on those missions, those interests. What stands out is that in India's own immediate neighborhood, US and Indian interests, far from being congruent, are so divergent that US approach is antithetical to India's vital interests in India's own immediate neighborhood. And we refuse to face up to this reality that whether you look at any country in South Asia, whether it's Bangladesh, Pakistan, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Nepal, even Maldives, where is the congruence? Look at what the US is doing. They are propping up military-backed regimes in Bangladesh and in Pakistan while seeking to topple the military regime in Myanmar. The Biden administration, through sanctions and through transfer of so-called non-lethal military aid to Myanmar, is actually causing problems for us in India's northeast, because some of these drones and some other weapons supplied by Western powers to the Myanmar rebels are now entering Manipur state. So these are the realities, and I think that the most fundamental issue that India faces is a very combustible neighborhood. Whenever I visited Israel in the past, one question that often Israelis would ask is India's neighborhood worse than Israel's, or is Israel's neighborhood worse than India's? The fact is that India's neighborhood is quite combustible, and it poses a perennial challenge to India's internal and external security, and it weighs down India. But whenever India is caught napping by any development, that development imposes enduring costs on India. India was caught napping by the April 2020 Chinese encroachments on key borderlands of eastern Ladakh, and we are still paying costs for that. Similarly, we were caught napping by the regime change in Bangladesh. That shouldn't have happened. We should have read the warning signs, but we were caught napping by the regime change in Bangladesh. And the fact that now Bangladesh is now in the control of Islamist forces, the undemocratic forces, with the military calling the shots from behind the scenes, all that is going to weigh on India's internal security, especially the security of India's northeast. And I think while India's geopolitical weight is clearly rising, India's international profile has also been rising, yet I think we should not forget that India remains basically a soft power. Its foreign policy is still quite reactive, still quite ad hoc in its fundamental approach. We keep quiet on issues where we should be speaking up. For example, when China has announced this new super dam on India's border, complete silence from New Delhi. Why doesn't India speak up on issues? Or who's going to speak up for India? If China had been India's place and such a dam had been constructed, or approval had been approved on the border, the Chinese would have made a lot of made lot of loud protests. They would have spoken about the environmental havoc such a dam would wreak on downstream basin. But this is just one example of many where we tend to be so reactive and ad hoc, and this is the bane of Indian foreign policy, unfortunately.
Well, two views here. One very sort of larger picture, talking about how we can perhaps get by. The other one, a slightly more pessimistic view, saying that don't look outwards, look inwards. We leave it at this, viewers. Thank you very much, Mr. Sambhal and Professor Cheleni, for being with us. a wonderful exchange there. Whereas the one consistent challenge over the last decade has been a below expectation job and salary growth rate. And depending on who you talk to, the numbers vary. The government says that, look, we're doing a pretty efficient job. Its detractors say that you're nowhere near A, the targets that you set for yourself, and B, where an economy that expects to achieve the targets that it sets for itself needs to be. The data shows the government has missed most of its own jobs and income targets. Is there a deeper problem? To analyze that, we have with us Mr. Mohandas Pai and Gurcharan Das, both of whom have been writing extensively on these issues and speaking on these issues even in and around budget season. So let me first begin with you, Mr. Gurcharan Das. I remember we spoke a year back during the budget presentation and you had some ideas about creating jobs. Are you satisfied with what the government has done since then? The budget gave a lot of support toward that end, but has it really achieved the potential?
Clearly, it has not. Rahul, our problem is two-sided. One is the fact that 45% of our people are still on the farm. So we need to take, like every country which became prosperous and middle class, we need to take people from farms on to industry. Now, we have done a good job since 1991, grown at 6.5% a year, which is amazing for a democracy, but we have still not created an industrial revolution. And we won't go into why, but looking forward, we can do it. What has helped India, the momentum India has, is in services. And that government doesn't have to do a damn thing about it. That will continue. And we have a new, government should stay out of it. In fact, we have a new engine in this area of the services job, which are in the global capability centers. There are almost 1,500 of them. Multinationals have set up in India, and they have created 3.2 million jobs in the last 10 years. Now, this will continue. Where we need the government to act is in the factory jobs. And that can be done because the preconditions are far better than they were in 1991. Today, we have far better infrastructure. Road mileage has doubled since 2011. The port handling capacity has quadrupled. We have one market through the GST, so trucks are moving faster. And we've had a digital revolution, which has created financial inclusion. And importantly, the world is down on China. Many, many companies, the Chinese companies included, want to create another sourcing base than China. And India is the obvious one, but except for the iPhone, India has not succeeded in getting the kind of investment we need. Vietnam is way ahead of us in doing so. And the reason why is we still need to do the heavy lifting of reforms. All the same reforms that the government tried to do in the last 10 years. You have to do those land acquisition, labor, not just the labor codes, but you have to make it even better than that. You need to, I would say, our electricity rates are too high.
Okay.
And so on. But let me just say the most important area is that India is still not a good place, not a hospitable place to do business. It's an over-regulated economy. Every businessman still talks about it. And this is, therefore, the reform of the administration. Mm-hmm. China gave an incentive to its lower bureaucrats to bring in investment.
Okay.
They measured them. They gave them the incentive to create production. And we haven't done that. Unfortunately, our politics acts against it because there are no votes. There are votes for freebies, and there's not one politician who goes out there and sells on the basis that I will create jobs.
Okay, let me bring in Mohandas Pai, who runs Iron Capital, knows a thing or two about the corporate side of the world. Mohandas Pai, the government is spending more and more on welfare schemes. Some of them are beginning to appear like raveries. You're not a fan of all of this. I know that because I sort of see the stuff that you comment about. There is a need, obviously, and the need is because perhaps wages are too low or there are no jobs. So people need to be sort of propped up in some way or the other. How do we get out of it? This problem, A, of this sort of lag between our aspirations, our targets, and the reality.
Rahul, let me give some data. I think we should go with data to understand the problem and define the problem. Like Gucharan says, 45% of people in the working group depend on agriculture. And in agriculture, over the last 6 years, an interesting thing has happened. Women participation has gone up to 63%. Men's participation has come down to 37%. So men are migrating away from agriculture. Women who are not occupied are coming into agriculture. The number still remains at 45%. Now we have to move a lot of them to industry to get them a better income. And then we have 25% of workforce in industry, 30% in services. The per capita income of people in agriculture, I'm quoting memory, is around 77,000 rupees. Per capita income of people in industry, 2,57,000. And services about 3,57,000. And I think the ratio between them is to 1 is to maybe 3.2 is to 4.5 or something like that. So it's very clear there is no future for people who are dependent upon agriculture, and we have to shift them to industry. Now, how do we shift them to industry? Now, these are low-skilled people who cannot do high-skilled jobs. So we have to look at having 400 of the poorest districts in India where there's surplus labor, and labor is also coming off agriculture, to create incentives for labor-intensive industries to go there. If you look at China's exports, 60% of China's exports are in labor-intensive goods. So we need an incentive scheme to say, in these 400 districts, if anybody hires a person, pays ESI, PF, government will give them, say, 2,000 rupees a month for 2 years, for every new job created by DBT. And they will pay the employee share of ESI and PF, which is a very formal thing. There's already a scheme like that called Kaushal, but do it across the country to incentivize people. Second, one of the difficulties of labor-intensive industry is the supervisory people who come from cities. Now, we have to pick up the 5,000 census towns. India has maybe 6,000 census towns, 5,000 census towns, and of them, find out what are there in these 400 poor districts and invest in them heavily, 10 to 20 crores a year to build infrastructure in the small towns in these districts for roads, for power, for water, sewage, etc., and try to build flatted factories. So what will happen is, around these small towns, many labor-intensive industries will come up. People can travel there 8-10 kilometers and go back, and jobs will be created. Purchasing power will be created there, and there'll be massive growth. This happens in some areas like Raipur, etc. For example, Bangalore has got 500,000 people in the garment industry. I mean, we don't have people in the garment industry. They come from outside. And when I ask why are they there, I'm told the supervisor will not go to smaller towns. So we got to build these smaller towns because urbanization is the key to growth. India cannot remain a nation of villages. Nobody wants to live in villages. 70% of farmers' children don't want to live in villages. They need other kind of jobs, and we have to shift. Please give me some time. Now, unless we have this massive urbanization in small towns, we are not going to make the shift, and that has to be one part of job creation. Then as far as industry is concerned, industry is getting increasingly automated. And the job intensity of every dollar or rupee put into industry is coming down because of automation. Automation is necessary for quality and for certainty and higher production. Now, we must also make sure that the barriers to industry. What are the barriers to industry? Like Gurcharan said, high power tariff, because power tariff subsidizes the free power that states give. Give power tariff with a normal part of profit, like the Electricity Act has been saying. Power tariff, give them good roads and infrastructure, and make sure the supply chain costs come down, which is coming down. For example, we have one of India's biggest industrial estates called Pina in Bangalore, where the roads are absolutely dirty and filled with full of potholes. I mean, it's a terrible place to work. You go to Singapore, see the park, and then build flatted factories in these 400 towns so that industry can come there and help industry become much more efficient.
Okay.
Industry has to become more productive, and that has to happen. And in the services area, what we need to do is the harassment caused by services by the Inspector Raj should end. Yes, services have been growing pretty well. Tourism has to be improved. We have a new program now, but the connectivity and roads have to be there. We need better trains. For example, you go from Delhi to Varanasi, it takes you 9 hours by Vande Bharat. Why can't we have a fast train for 3 or 4 hours? So we have to build connectivity. Tourism is one area. And the second area, which is very, very big, is of course, IT services and others, which are growing, which are already about 6 million people. And the other business services, another big area.
Okay.
But you must remember, all of them will congregate near the big towns. And we need to have a particular strategy for this. We got a messed up strategy. Now, as far as jobs, and I'll give me 2 minutes. As far as jobs are concerned, the EPFO says about 1.2 crore fresh people join the EPFO every year.
Yes.
58% are people in the age group of 18 to 28 for whom it is the first job. 1 crore young people graduate every year. So we are producing a fair large number of jobs. And these are formal jobs which pay ESI, PF linked to others, so the real jobs. And jobs are going up. And if you see the collection EPFO, it is about 25 lakh crores today. Jobs are going up. Now, what is the problem about the jobs? 80-90% job pay less than 20,000 rupees. If you look at the Quest report, the Quest Wiki report where Nageshwaran spoke, you see that wages have gone up over 5 years, minimum wages by 1 or 2% in many areas, because these are for contract labor. 60-70% of formal employment is contract labor and is not going up. And if you look at corporate profits in the last 5 years, they almost doubled.
Okay.
Last year, corporates paid 11,32,000 crore of corporate tax. At 25% pre-tax profit is 45 lakh crore of profits earned pre-tax. That is 15% of GDP. That is, give me 1 more minute. That is very huge. So there, we have to increase minimum wages on national level and the state level for the formal sector, so that people get more money in their pockets. And in many industries like IT services, where there is no wage, where there are no people talking for wages, the people at the bottom 60% have got a very lousy deal. We must talk to them and tell them they have to increase the wages, or the people at the bottom are getting exploited. We need compassionate capitalism. What we're seeing in India is mercenary capitalism, like we have in America. And I think we must name and shame them by giving out all this data to say that when companies say people are there, get us asset, they must also pay them well. Boards are paying themselves more. They're paying the top one management more. It has become a crony capitalism, different type. So we need all these things to be done together in the next 3 years.
So I've actually now come to the last 1 minute of this segment. It was supposed to be 14 minutes. I'm at 13 minutes. So Gurcharan Das, what is stopping us? 1 minute, please. What is stopping us? We know the problem.
Let's learn from the countries that have succeeded. The latest to succeed is Vietnam. Earlier it was China. And when the Prime Minister of Vietnam heard that India had got the iPhone manufacturing, he flew to Cupertino, California, and said, okay, we've lost the iPhone. Can we at least get the tablet? And he got it. What I'm saying is that this is the kind of approach that a lot of companies want to move away from China. And I would go to those very companies. It should be the chief ministers, like the chief minister of Tamil Nadu. He flew to Detroit when he heard that the factory of Ford was lying empty.
True.
And he persuaded the CEO of Ford to make cars for exports because they did not succeed in the Indian domestic market. Well, this is the approach that
But that will guarantee people coming in, till you give them that environment. What are the two or three things? I don't have much more
Well,
time.
the
1 minute. Three or
environment-
two things that need to create the environment. What do we need to do?
You know, I mean, right now, the iPhone story has electrified
True.
the investment climate in the United States.
Yeah.
And it's one of the best ambassadors for us.
Okay.
We should take all the top labor intensive leaders, brand leaders, Nike, etc., and persuade them to come, because the Indian entrepreneur can give them distribution possibilities also in the country.
Right.
Many things we have. I would say this route is the fastest route I can think of right now.
Okay, big factories, big factory route. Bring them, catch these people by the scruff of their neck if that is what is required. Bring them here, ask them to set up, and say that, look, this is one window, and we can give you all these services, and we can expedite them. We can create a open road to a target. Rajiv Kumarji, my first question to you, sir. How do you perceive this slight blip that we saw, 5.48%? Is this something that is going to sort of occupy the mind space going ahead? Are we going to get back to 7% plus or maybe even more? What is your assessment, sir?
Hi, Rahul. Great to be on this program, as always, with you. And hi, Subbu. How are you? Doing well there. Rahul, on your question, I think 5.4% is a blip. It's not something that will continue. The Indian economy is most likely going to be bounce back to above 6% in the second half of this fiscal year. That's and probably go about 6% or so. But I'm a worried man. Most parts is that it will not go up to 7, as you said, as easily. And 6% is good, but not good enough in my view. And therefore, but at the same time, one must tell oneself that in a world which is where the economy is getting more fragmented, where their protectionist tendencies are on the rise, where world trade growth is getting to be slower than the GDP growth, it's not going to be easy for any economy to do 6% plus. But, and this is a big but, that for ourselves, for our aspirations, for our objectives, we need to go to that 7%, and that's something that is an imperative for India to realize its own objectives and its own aspirations, as it were. But 5.4% coming back is not a trend figure, and it's something that will soon be forgotten when the Q3 and Q4 numbers come out in due course.
But you do say that getting back to 7% looks very, very tough. Now, why is that, Mr. Kumar? Why is that? Because, Dr. Subramanian, and he's written this brilliant book, India at 100, where he's projecting some big things, but those are all predicated on larger growth rates, which, according to you, may not be a reality for the next few years. Then what happens?
Yeah, I think, Rahul, my major worry is the performance of the private investment. Let's remember that in India, the main driver of growth has always been private sector investment and private sector growth. Public sector expenditure, public capex, which has risen very smartly to 1 trillion rupees, etc., can substitute for a while. But the real driver of growth has to be private investment, and private investment has remained shy. And there are now recent reports. Yesterday, there were articles and a lot of social media saying that a lot of HNIs are leaving India, to be registered in Dubai and Singapore, etc. That's also a cause of worry. Why am I raising that? Is that I think the ecosystem to promote private investment, the ecosystem where the government appears to be in the service of the private investor, where the government is promoting and encouraging private investment and not acting as its as a sort of block, as it were, is not yet in place in my view.
Okay, and of course, many people are also sort of saying that credit offtake for industry has been low simply because the interest rates are high. There's that little sideshow that is also taking place. But let me bring in Dr. Subramanian. Doctor, look, those numbers that you projected into the future are contingent upon vigorous growth. Let's be honest about that. I've gone through most of your book, and I think Rajiv ji is sort of trying to tell us that, look, the ecosystem to generate this, to draw out this private investment is not there. Now, would you agree with this thesis? And if so, then what needs to be done in specific terms?
Very good evening, Rahul. Very good evening, Rajiv ji, and viewers as well. Rahul, I think we must acknowledge that like the Indian cricket team needs reforms, the Indian economy needs reforms as well. India needs to grow at 8%. That is the potential that the Indian economy has. And for that, reforms are really critical. Rajiv ji very rightly brought in the ease of doing business. I think this is an aspect that particularly impacts the smaller firms. And, I think there is a lot of inputs that keep coming to me. Many people keep sending their inputs, and smaller firms are particularly hurting because of some of the difficulties, created by GST and overall tax. I think the emphasis on tax, and the difficulties it creates for ease of doing business is something that must be acknowledged, both on the GST side and on income tax. And I think at the same time, we must also focus on reforms, especially at the state level. And this is an aspect that, in my book tour, Rahul, I have been emphasizing that India is a federal polity, and therefore many subjects are under the jurisdiction of states. Yet, whether it is the media, whether it is the industry associations like CII, FICCI, ASSOCHAM, none of us really put the spotlight on state reforms. Rahul, when was the last time you remember, a Maharashtra budget or a Gujarat budget or an Andhra Pradesh budget or Tamil Nadu budget being actually examined with the same attention that the federal budget actually the union government's budget is focused on? I was part of 4 budgets, and we all used to go and explain the logic behind that to the media and to the industry associations, yet there is absolutely no focus. I'll just take one example to highlight. We talk about manufacturing. When it comes to manufacturing, a manufacturing firm needs 6 inputs. Those are land, labor, capital, power, logistics, and ease of doing business. Of this, except for capital, 5 other inputs are states' jurisdictions. And yet, are we asking the question of state chief ministers, state finance ministers, what are they doing for land, to ease purchase of land? What are they doing on labor? What are they doing on power? What are they doing to improve logistics? What are they doing on ease of doing business? A lot of ease of doing business is at the state level. What are we doing to actually reform the bureaucracy? I think this is something that is really critical as well. These are questions that we must be asking. And I say once again, like the Indian team needs reforms, the Indian economy needs reforms as well.
Hello, Namaskar. This is First Post and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma.